Welcome, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're excited to talk about patient experience today and how higher education will impact this field and sector that's growing more and more every day. I want to let everybody know this session's being recorded. And after the panelists conclude, all of our attendees can ask questions via the chat feature, and we'll get to as many as we can. So first, I want to take a quick moment to introduce our panelists. Katie P. Desiderio is the Executive Director of the Graduate Business Program here at Moravian College and Assistant Vice President of Corporate Educational Partnerships here at Moravian College. Katie joined Moravian in 2009 as a faculty member of the Economics and Business Department, and since then has held various leadership roles, including the honor of being the first female chairperson of the Economics and Business Department. And prior to joining Moravian, Katie worked in advertising and consumer marketing for a Fortune 500 company. Katie's excited to bring her thought leadership and corporate marketing experience to students, colleagues, alumni, and community partners. Janet Biedron is also joining us. She's the president of PX Academy and has developed online courses on creating a patient-centric culture, along with the strategies of how to obtain excellence in patient-centered care. She's held a variety of leadership positions throughout her 45-year career in healthcare. She's the former VP of Patient Experience for CX University, now former CEO of Life Care Hospitals in Chester County, Westchester, PA, Kindred Hospitals of New Jersey, Rahway, Kindred Hospital of Sacramento, and CEO of Vibra Hospitals of Sacramento. And Janet's also currently on several advisory boards and has served as a consultant to specialty hospitals. And last but not least, JP Orlando also joins us today. Dr. Orlando serves as the Chief Medical Education Officer and ACGME Designated Institutional Officer at St. Luke's University Health Network here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Dr. Orlando earned his Doctor of Education in Corporate Learning Leadership from the Wharton School at Penn, his Master of Education in Organizational Development from Temple University, and his BA from Moravian College in International Management and American Political Thought. JP also served in the United States Army Reserves for 10 years and is actually a former baseball player at Moravian College. So welcome another Greyhound. We're happy to have you here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Katie and we'll get this panel discussion started.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for the warm introductions, and welcome JP and Janet and everyone who's joining us today. Mike, if you'll advance to the Moravian mission, I always love to open with the Moravian mission statement, which is to prepare each individual for a reflective life, fulfilling careers, and transformative leadership in a world of change. And so I share this because as I move into this conversation about working with Janet on the PX Academy work, it's really important to think about the purpose of Moravian College, and two, the grounding that you'll hear our president, Brian Grigsby, is often about thinking about the art of the possible. And so, we're the 6th oldest college in America, the first to educate women, and we're always looking for this space of how we can move into new areas and really help prepare students for jobs that don't yet exist. And so I'm exceptionally excited to be here and to talk about this partnership and the really incredible work and possibilities in our work together. So in this partnership with CX University, there's the opportunity for students to go through and take the professional certificate in PXA and transfer that for prior learning assessment credit. And that's both for our MBA programs and in our MHA programs. And so before I turn it over to Janet, who will tell us a little bit about patient experience and her history and the relevance of really connecting what's happening in industry with higher education, I also want to open up the conversation with my colleague and Moravian alum, JP Orlando, who also serves as a faculty member in the MBA and MHA programs. So Janet, do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about patient experience, and JP certainly weigh in as Janet is talking about the programs.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. I'm very happy to talk about patient experience. It's actually kind of a new name for us in healthcare. often we talk about patient satisfaction, but experience is so much more than that. Experience has to do with the end-to-end journey of a patient through their encounters with the healthcare system. And it became very important to me, without even realizing the terminology of patient experience, back in the 90s, when I was part of a team that transformed the way we admitted patients into the hospital. We did this because of the backlog in an emergency department, and it seemed that patients kind of got lost that had to be admitted. Once they were admitted, everyone seemed to forget that they were actually in the emergency department. So we put together a whole transformative change on bringing services to the patient rather than taking the patient to the services. And that kind of got me thinking about, we should always be thinking about the patient as a partner in the care that we give. And in the 45 years that I've been a nurse and in various leadership roles and at the bedside, I never really felt that I was part of the journey with the patient. And so over time, throughout my experience in various educational opportunities and working with CX University, I realized all of this initial work had to do with how do you enhance the patient experience. And so we put together the education around this discipline. It's sorely needed in healthcare today. And I'm happy that we have this partnership now with Moravian College so that we can get this knowledge out to the folks that really need it, that have the positions and the ability to make transformative cultural changes within their organization. It goes beyond just the verbiage of it.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I agree with Janet as far as everything that she just mentioned there about the importance within healthcare and that stuff. I mean, I feel like in my role as the chief graduate medical education officer here at St. Luke's is that when we bring in residents and fellows into our system, that we want to anchor them right away in some key core principles, one of which is the patient experience. Now they may say, well, I've had, my OSCEs in medical school. I've had those patient interactions in, my medical school experience. But one of the wonderful things about focusing on the patient is that it really helps, I find, the physicians, the providers, our staff really kind of connect to their purpose and why they got into this field. And so in a lot of ways, the patient experience and thinking about that is a compass. And it's different than you find in our regular kind of consumer lives, which is, I think, one of the first things that we really try to help our incoming residents and fellows, kind of think about, which is it's a different type of interaction. It's a different type of experience. It's not necessarily your Amazon.com experience or your Best Buy. There's different needs. And so we have them go through several different experiences with standardized patients. And what's interesting about that is at the back end, as part of that onboarding process, is that they get some new insights as far as and not just new insights about making sure you're eye level with a patient when you're talking with them, but also that connects a little bit to why their joy is and why they got into healthcare. So there's a lot of I've experienced a lot of mutual and surprising, unexpected benefits of the focusing on the patient experience, besides the mere fact that it's the right thing to do. But I could talk about that for a while. So anyway, go ahead, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet and JP. If we want to go on to the next slide, we can take a little preview at the course set, and Janet can take us through those courses. And I love that JP wove in, I opened with the Moravian mission, right? Our purpose statement. And very much we think about that, right? Preparing each individual for a reflective life, fulfilling careers and transformative leadership in a world of change. And, very much this, as he mentioned, allows us to kind of take a step back and think about purpose, right? What it's really all about. Innately, this encourages that. So Janet, if you want to take us through the course set.
Oh, certainly. I think it's important to note that in patient experience, we're really built on the foundational principles of customer experience. Patients do not become less of a customer once they become a patient. You know, they're used to this very consumeristic world that we live in now. And so there's certain expectations that patients have today that they may not have had in years prior. So yes, they do expect timely. They do expect to be included in the decision. They do expect to be partners. And so when PX 801 is patient experience strategy. So what is the strategy that an organization needs to take to develop this patient-centric culture? Does it involve employee engagement, which of course it does? Does it involve having the patients actually sitting at the table with the care providers and talking about what their needs are? We are moving away from that paternalistic medical model where the physician says, this is what you need to do, and the patient does it. Because the patient now has their own idea. They have access to the internet. They can communicate. They know what's out there. Much more educated patient we have today. And we should embrace that. So organizations need to develop strategies around how do we do that? And then in 802, we talk about that culture. We talk about what does it mean to actually have a seat at the board table that actually includes the patient, maybe an empty seat, but that seat is there to represent the patient. So decisions that organizations make need to consider that. And today it's even more challenging because with COVID, we're in this contactless environment in the hospitals and in physicians' offices. How do you connect with a patient when you can no longer touch the patient? You may not even be able to get into the room with the patient. So you need to consider that. The environment shouldn't change how we connect with our patients. We just need to figure out ways to still communicate with them and to make the patient and the patient's family part of their care plan. It is their health, it is their plan, and they need to be part of it. So the entire organization has to build a culture around them. You see, when I was a new nurse, patients really just saw the world from like the back of a stretcher, lying on a stretcher, and different disciplines would come and touch them, right? So patients are seeing things kind of in a horizontal view, you know, the respiratory therapist comes, the lab comes, the doctor comes, the dietitian comes, but that has to change. The patient now that has to be a team approach, and that's all part of the culture. And so the course in 802 brings that strategy to life, right? In the terms of transforming a culture. So in 803, design, innovation, and voice of the patient. So we need to understand the patient's journey from the patient's viewpoint. And we need to make it as seamless as possible. When there's many steps, redundant steps, that's when mistakes are made. That's when errors are made. That's when we interfere with safety. And so we need to design our processes that include the patient and that are as few steps and as few caretakers as possible. And of course, the voice of the patient is very important, right? We need to hear the patient. Like I said, we're no longer dictating to the patient. We need to listen and we need to hear their voice. What is it that they need? You know, you may have a truck driver that used to, be up all night driving the truck. He had the night shift. But now in a hospital, no, you go to sleep now at night and you will be up at 7 and you're going to have your breakfast at 7:30. We need to switch that around. We need to understand what it is that would make a patient become involved in their own wellness and how is the best way to do that. So 803 addresses that, as well as the innovation that needs to take place to make those things happen. And in 804, and I know JP will know this too. I mean, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So you need to understand where you are today, have a vision of where you want to get to, and measure that experience along the way. And so these 4 courses give the learner the broad knowledge base to understand the patient experience, your role in it, and how to improve it.
Yeah, I mean, I could just add to that a little bit. I remember when I first started working in hospitals about 20 years ago, that one of my first projects was working on ED flow, and we were looking at why is there some leakage within our EDs? Why do some patients leave and others don't? And I remember distinctively being in the ER for about 8 hours, and towards the end of the night, and we had an observational sheet there. We were trying to really understand kind of the patient experience through observation. And you notice after a while that when there's no interaction with the staff, specifically the physician, that people start leaving. And so fast forward a couple of weeks later, when we changed that workflow to actually have the physician come out every couple minutes just to give updates on what was going on in the back. Because the interesting thing about it is that from the waiting room in the ED, you couldn't see the ambulances coming in the back, and so you never really saw or understood what was going on in the pods in the where they were delivering care. And so, boy, I'll tell you what, did we see a real decrease in the number of patients that would leave the ED when you have the doctor just come out and just give an update, right? And what that really showed was, and for anybody who's been in an ED, I mean, you could relate to this, right? I mean, it just understanding what's going on, because you can't see past the walls typically, but anytime that you can get those type of communication from the back to understand, hey, what's going on, to help manage expectations is a huge component of that experience. So not just understanding kind of when you're next in line, but just understanding and having that connection, that human connection, which is so important within healthcare, and doing it the right way. It's almost like a little bit of and you'll hear this, I think, in the course, is the service recovery piece. So we try to design systems that really accommodate the patient experience and to be mindful of it as best as possible. But you always have to understand and think about that service recovery piece when things do go wrong, because we're dealing with human systems. And so, those things are going to happen. So I just wanted to share my experience and just kind of build on your piece, Janet. You were talking about the measurement and analysis of the patient experience. And so those are really some valuable tools and insights that you get through this program.
And certainly measurement has to do with the patient voice and observation, as you just mentioned, JP. We talk about that. That's discussed in 803, all the different ways to get the data that you need to have the full picture. I think one of the things that recently, more than even recently, there seems to be a disconnect between what administration may say about something or the goals that they have and what's actually happening at the bedside, right? So we have to understand that the folks that are the caretakers, the first line folks right there in the bedside with the patients, are they representing the organization the way you want them to represent you, right? And they're not going to be able to do that if they don't feel cared for and nurtured by the organization themselves. Recently, I'm in a group on Facebook that's called Show Me Your Stethoscope, and it's nurses. It's a large group. And over 2,700 respondents to the question, are patients customers? I didn't read all 2,700 comments, but I can tell you the theme is nurses at the bedside do not see the patient as a customer. In fact, they almost have a negative connotation about what that means. It's not a positive thing. And, pardon my language on it, but I'm quoting verbatim from nurses, we're here to save their asses, not kiss them. This is not a KFC where you get it the way you want it. And I could go on and on. So there's one thing that's happening in the boardroom and in the administrative offices, but it's not at the bedside. And it's not that nurses aren't caring. They just need the education and they need the support of the organization that we're all part of this care team, and the patient is as well. And these courses set the stage for that, sets the stage for the organization to understand how do you connect with the bedside nurse and the frontline folks And it doesn't matter if you are environmental services or you are food delivery service, whatever it is, because each connection with the patient is extremely important and represents your organization. And keep in mind, every organization can say, my hospital is the best, because I said it's the best. But your brand and your organization is what your patients are saying about you. And if they can't get a meal on time that's warm, or they can't get a pain medication when they're in pain, or if they don't have a doctor come in and visit them, then that's what they're going to say about you. And so it's a challenge in healthcare. It seems like in other industries, they have nailed it for the most part. You do look at an Amazon or a Zappos and you see what they're doing. And if you can, book a plane ticket and have a special meal when you're on that plane ticket, and you can do all this online, patients should be able, our most valuable human persons should be able to have that same level of attention. And you get that knowledge of how to do that in these courses.
Thanks, Janet. And GP, I wanted to thank you too for giving the preview of your experience and coming into healthcare, and that in St. Luke's University Health Network, that goes back to the importance of culture, right? Just as you said, that there's this awareness building and a mindfulness of the human element that is just so important, right, for both the healthcare staff and for patients, right? And so thinking about that in the 360-degree view, and we're so excited at Moravian, to be able to build this bridge to just generate this awareness, and look at how we're bringing in professional certificates like this one, right, that have such positive impact overall, from the employee to the patient. And so, for everyone that's here, we'll open up for questions. Of course, you can write your questions in the chat. And certainly if you want to connect with any one of us following this session, we're excited to talk about, this certificate and the opportunities that are available. So I'll open it up now for any questions in the chat.
Katie, the first question we have is, how would healthcare organizations benefit from developing a patient-obsessed culture?
Well,
I can open it up to Janet or JP to respond.
Well, I'll just throw this out there. It's an absolute must, right? The patient-obsessed culture, what does that mean? That means our whole purpose is to support the patient in their healthcare journey. So everything an organization does is to create that culture, because it will also then increase your bottom line, right? Patients will want to come back. I was satisfied here. I got good care here. My outcomes were great. And that's another thing. You want patients to have good outcomes, the best possible clinical outcome. And sometimes the best possible clinical outcome is a peaceful death. But whatever that outcome is, that they were supported and the organization is seen as a caring environment, they can only benefit from that.
Yeah, I would just add that a lot of reimbursement has changed over the last 5 to 6 years. And so patients' rating of their experience in healthcare systems is part of what that reimbursable is. And so, it makes up like 30% of the total reimbursement or something similar, something around there. So there's a little bit of a financial get from having a patient-obsessed, culture. But the other thing is, I think it helps, a culture stay focused on, again, why they're there. I remember one time observing a resident, inserting a central line at the bedside. After some time, if you have 2 or more insertions or sticks, that there's a higher probability of getting infection. And so the nurse stopped the line and brought the senior resident in, and everything was fine. And when you're dealing with high acuity patients, that could really, happen. You need to call for help sometimes, especially if that's not something you normally do on a regular basis. Anyway, I spoke with the nurse and I spoke with the resident afterwards, just to kind of get some insight as far as like what had happened. Why didn't they stop the line themselves when they knew that what the protocol was? And what it came down to is, on one side, you have the resident that's trying to, hey, I want to be competent at this. I want to get good at this. I want to be able to do this right. I don't want that senior resident to think that I can't do this. I've practiced. It's not this the first time I've done it. And then even talking to one of the other nurses who was at the bedside, who didn't stop the line. It was another nurse that did, asking her, Stacy, what happened? She would say, well, I was rooting for my colleague at the bedside to get that line, And so in each one of those perspectives, they were very altruistic in what they were doing. But the thing they forgot about was the patient. And so, the value of having a patient-obsessed culture is that it keeps that, making sure in all the muckety-muck that goes on in healthcare and the stress and the complexity and doing things right competently, it makes sure to keep that patient front and center. That's what it does.
Great. Next question. Are hospitals still using Press Ganey surveys? Is their focus strictly on satisfaction, or have they shifted to measuring the total experience journey?
Hospitals are certainly still using Press Ganey. But I believe, my feeling is that Press Ganey is losing some of its influence in how hospitals operate, only because they've been focused on satisfaction, and now there's so many other organizations that give customer feedback that are competing with Press Ganey. But the one nationally recognized measure of experience are the HCAP scores that hospitals are familiar with, because in it does have questions around the patient experience. And so the HCAPs, which is the government is actually, helping. If you're a Medicare hospital and you're getting money from the government, you're going to have to comply with HCAPS reporting. And that's really the measure for experience. And so a lot of these other competitors are trying to get that, work with CMS to be able to give them the customer feedback. But Press Ganey is still there. I mean, Press Ganey, I think, has been around as long as I've been. So it's quite the dinosaur. I hope there's nobody on the call from Press Ganey.
Do you anticipate technology measurement platforms in the business world to be inserted into the healthcare industry?
Well, I'm seeing it now. I know that there are multiple customer feedback organizations that are vying for that business. And because other industries seem to lead healthcare in many ways, right? And they've identified, and I don't want to throw out all the names, but they have identified that patient experience is now the new experience, right? We're finally looking at something that should have been looking at for a long time besides Press Ganey. So they see an opportunity. And I've actually spoken to some of these organizations that are interested in learning how to not only get the customer feedback, get the patient feedback, but to also, what do you do with that information once you provide it? So yeah, other technology companies are in there. I can name a couple of them: Qualtrics, SMG. They're in that market.
Just to build off that, when I read the question, what comes to mind is artificial intelligence. And so, you think about all those different, platforms that are, I had to return a package from Amazon this week, and I was chatting with AI on my cell phone. It was unbelievable how anticipatory that, artificial intelligence was in that interaction. Poignant, right on. They had a great algorithm. It was a great experience. Some of the things that are evolving, emerging, and I think it's Amazon.com partnering with EHMR companies such as Epic, and trying to link the products that consumers need based off of their discharge orders, right? And so you have a discharge order, and isn't it interesting? It links to your Amazon account, and your Amazon account will give you suggestions. There's a couple of videos on it. They give you suggestions as far as what you might want to consider purchasing to in your post-discharge healing process, right? And so, as far as technology measurement platforms and those technologies coming in to enhance the patient experience, I mean, imagine that. All of a sudden, you get all these recommendations about what can help you in your ailments going forward, and then you pick and choose. You can talk to your doctor about it, but it's only going to increase over time. It's really amazing.
Thank you, JP.
I have one more question. Sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, go ahead, Mike. I think we were going to both read the same question, so I'll leave it to you.
Okay, I think I have a different one actually. With clinician burnout rate being between 30 to 50% in different studies, is there a role or training in these certifications in keeping providers healthier to enhance the actual patient experience?
Well, actually, there's a whole section in culture about employee engagement. As I said earlier, you cannot have a transformative culture if you don't have employees that are engaged. They have to feel valued. They have to understand their purpose. They have to connect with the organization. And healthcare is no different than any other organization, except that in healthcare, you're dealing with life and death and sadness and happiness and overworked and understaffed and all these other components that in any other healthcare and any other organization would not tolerate some of the conditions these employees have to work in. And in healthcare, we shouldn't tolerate it either. And so there is a whole component on how do you engage employees and how does the organization understand how important that is.
Yeah, and just to add to those insights as well, are healthcare providers ready for the change that is going to happen? I would say yes, but we have to create space for it. And so patient experience is a wonderful way to focus and to help in the ideation of their own professionalism. I know one of the interventions we do around this is around narrative medicine, where we have providers, staff, physicians kind of talk about their best patient experiences that they've had, or the patient they can't get out of their mind, and they write it down, and then in a very safe way share, with partners or maybe even with a large group what their experience is. And so it's the tactic, writing it down and kind of getting it out, which I'm married to a trauma nurse. So for the last 25 years, and sometimes she just comes home and she just needs to vocalize it. She just needs to get it out because it's an emotional experience for the providers. And so, helping to facilitate their wellness and their connection to purpose, why they're doing things, and how they're evolving as a professional. I think people are ready for, especially on the heels of COVID.
That's great. Thank you. One more question. Do healthcare organizations have listening posts and social media channels to capture the sentiments of patients and their families? Has healthcare expanded to monitoring social media?
Well, in my experience as a CEO, we did monitor, Yelp, but usually it was complaints, right? Very seldom do you have somebody out there saying, "I was the best thing that ever happened." It's mostly what went wrong. Don't go to that place. And I know that hospitals do look at that and they do respond, but I think a lot more can be done. Maybe JP, you have something more to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. The customer review piece occurs and is tracked, and our marketing department has a whole group that focuses on it. One of the interesting things that comes out of these are what's called affinity groups, and so you may have a handful of, let's say, cancer survivors within a certain age group or geography. Or ailment, and they'll come together and they will form a little affinity group among themselves that healthcare providers can enter every now and then to provide expertise and consult. And but it's interesting, like a lot of patients, once they understand they have an element and then they get together with other people who have the same thing, boy, I'll tell you what, there is an explosion of knowledge sharing that happens. And so when you talk about the patient experience and focusing on that, inventing those type of social media mechanisms really help to keep patient experience first.
Great. So one more question. Are healthcare providers ready for the change that's going to happen? Healthcare presents fertile ground for change. How will people shift away from legacy systems and adopt a new way of doing things, in your opinion?
Well, the best ones do, right? I mean, the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, John Hopkins, there's several, and St. Luke's, there's several hospital and healthcare systems that understand this, that have led the way. And any successful healthcare organization needs to get on board with this. It's the way it's the only way that they're going to be successful. So to that, yeah, we have to move away from the legacy systems and think about, and then in the course we talk about, innovation and how do you make your mark? How do you stand out? And what are your patients saying about you?
Yeah, I just echo Janet's comments. Right on.
Great. I think that's the questions we got so far. So does anybody have any closing remarks before we sign off?
Yeah, I want to thank Janet and JP for your ongoing commitment to this work and for modeling the importance and the investment in the human element. I love too so much of what you said in this space of, giving human beings voice, whether that is the employee of the hospital and the patient, and really providing a space for, voice to be heard. I think this certificate is so exciting and really cutting edge as we think about, our future. And Moravian is just so honored to be part of it.
I just wanted to say that all of the skills in creating a culture of patient centricity can be learned, even such things as empathy and trust. And these are vital, fundamental components on how do you make that transformative change. And these courses help the learner to develop those skills that are so important in today's healthcare systems.
And I guess just one final thought. John Carter defined leadership as producing change. And when you work on and stay focused on the patient experience, you are the catalyst of that change, which means that you're being a leader. So I guess my call to action is be a leader.
That's a good one. That is a good one.
And I think that was also a recruitment to take JP's leadership class with us in the program.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good job, Katie. I forgot. I'll take the class.
Got to throw in a little plug there at the end, of course. Have to do that.
We love it.
Well, I thank all our panelists for attending and participating today. This was great. We recorded this session, so we'll make this available to all those that registered and were not able to attend, and we'll be sharing this. Speaking of social media, we'll be sharing it on social media far and wide to make it available to people that couldn't join us today. And hopefully this will be the first of more conversations we have with PX Academy, with our partners at St. Luke's University Health Network, and of course, Dr. Desiderio. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.